There are intriguing storylines in golf that sometimes take us off of the golf course. And today we're going to explore one of them. And it harkens back to me to the movie The Founder, when Ray Kroc took away from the McDonald brothers the franchise. And I don't know who the bad guy is in this one as we look at what has happened in the world of one of the greatest golfers of all time, in Jack Nicklaus. And most would say he's the GOAT because of the major totals. And at the same time, the business side of Nicklaus, the Nicklaus world, the Nicklaus companies, the Nicklaus enterprises, probably will not compete for the title of greatest of all time. And we'll dig into that here. I'm so glad to welcome on to the program for the first time ever, Robert Oller from the Columbus Dispatch. And first of all, right off the top, Robert, here I am in Michigan. There you are in Columbus. So thank you for crossing into enemy territory for a few minutes.
Well, truth be told, I take a golf trip to Michigan up near Sheboygan, Mullet Lake every summer. So I am familiar with the beautiful upper part of Michigan. Not the UP, but the northern, what do you call it? The northern southern mainland?
Yeah, the northern lower. What we call that.
Yes.
So, there's a bit of a heat map that's recently come out that defines what up north is, depending on your starting point. So for folks in Columbus, sometimes they'll describe like Bay City as up north. And for those of us who live in the middle of the state, up north doesn't happen until you pay the bridge fare and go to the UP. So whatever your definition is, I'm glad you're able to make your way up here. But you did some deep dive into this whole world, this weird world of Nicklaus on Nicklaus, Nicklaus v. Nicklaus a while ago for the Dispatch. And it's fascinated me ever since. Is there a Cliff Notes version of what in the world's happening, why Jack has to sue for his own name, or why he's being sued for his own name?
Yeah, Cliff Notes is, first of all, and you touched on this, and maybe we'll get into it. Jack the golfer, the greatest, the GOAT, in terms of as a champion, I would say. I mean, Tiger can probably make an argument for a window of time. Tiger was probably the best that's ever played. But Jack's the GOAT. On the business side, not that. He has struggled, early on in his career. And I think part of it is just, I'm not sure about his big business acumen, but I also am not sure. I think he's a little naive. I think he's a good guy and he trusts people. And that's gotten him into trouble. And in this case, Howard Milstein, who is head of it's a little confusing because there's Golden Bear companies and then there's the there's the Nicklaus Company, LLC, which is this guy named Howard Milstein in New York City. He befriended Jack. Jack was looking for a way to pass on his company, mainly his design company, his golf course design company, to his kids and family. So anyhow, a friendship, I use that term loosely, at least initially, I think there was a friendship, a business relationship that essentially soured over time, because while initially it looked like it would be a promising, connection, 2007, this was in 2004-05, Jack was given $145 million, I believe. So for the Nicklaus companies, run by Milstein, to promote Golden Bear and anything Jack touched, merchandise, again, course design. Well, 2007 happens, the economy goes in the tank. The business deal doesn't really live up to expectations. Eventually, Jack, who has 41% of the company, sells that to Milstein. And at that point, I don't know, somewhere in the 2013, 14, maybe in that zone, Jack says he feels like he is totally controlled by this Howard Milstein. And Milstein's trying to run his life. Fast forward to the lawsuit by Milstein toward Jack and the Golden Bear Company. Basically, breach of contract is what we're talking, and that Jack kind of started to both venture out using the Golden Bear trademark and name, which Milstein claimed he owned, now, which is kind of an odd thing. You know, you're the golden bear, but you don't own your own name. Again, as you talked about Ray Kroc and McDonald's and all that. So where it stands now is Jack did win in court, at least preliminary victory, in that he gets to maintain his name and his course design, which is probably the big money maker at this point versus Golden Bear merchandise.
Yeah, and endorsement deals and things like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, Jack's a legend, but people are buying Tiger stuff. You know, he's people aren't not rushing out to buy the little Golden Bear on the shirts and the Nicklaus name that way.
Yeah.
But that's preliminary.
Yeah, and there's so many layers of this that I find confusing and a little bit nebulous. And some of it is, we all want the very best for Jack. He's a very nice man. He's a wonderful guy. And Barber couldn't be any more saintly in all the things that they do for charity and what they've done for the game. They're showing up at events and they're partnering with causes. I think of Folds of Honor. I think of their work with hospitals. I think with all these benevolent, human improvement projects. How about we put it that way, under some category I just made up? I sound like Costanza with the Human Fund.
I like it.
But that's really what they're into. I mean, Jack will and Barbara will both have tears streaming down their cheeks if they know that they're helping a real person, right? So with hearts like that, I have long had a soft spot in my life for those who want to help other people. And at the same time, I've got a real anger streak ready and chambered for those who take advantage of people with that kind of a heart. Now, it's entirely possible that the original conversations that took place in Jack's world were well-intentioned. Hey, let us help you sift through the mountains of offers and invitations that you get, and let us read the fine print. We'll deal with the legalese. You just do the handshakes and sign your name, and you do the designs and we'll manage it for you. And in some ways, Rob, it reminds me of what's happened to so many of the great heavyweight champions over the years, right? This feels very boxing-like to me, which is a strange comparison to maybe think of Jack in the same vein as a Larry Holmes or a Muhammad Ali, except that they were at the top of their games and were taken advantage of by what seems to be like nefarious people coming along and whispering in their ear. Are you getting that same vibe from all of this?
I am. And another way to look at it, take it outside of sports into the music industry. I know what happened, Bruce Springsteen back in the day, where these guys signed over their rights to a manager or someone and then just lost a lot of money. You can see it in cases. I think the recent movie, there was an Elton John movie. It's all the same, where the money person in their life takes advantage of them. And that has
Aretha, same thing.
Yeah, that has a feel to the boxing, the same thing, and to the music industry back in the day. And now with Jack, again, Jack has sort of made this mistake, if you want to call it a mistake, over and over. And in fact, he was given an opportunity to get out of this arrangement. And Howard Milstein, I hate to use the word sweet talk, but Milstein knows what he's doing, and essentially convinced Jack to stick with it when Jack could have got out of it. And Jack said he felt it was the right thing to do. Again, the humanitarian in Jack said it was the right thing to do to give it another try. Well, the give it another try blew up in his face, and that's where we are today.
Wow.
So he basically got, Milstein's a Harvard guy. He understands the economics, and Jack, if you want to say Jack's lawyers maybe let him down, I don't know. I don't know that much detail about it. So I hesitate to weigh in on what went wrong where and who's mostly responsible. It's a sad situation. And on the face of it, you're Jack Nicklaus and you can't take advantage of being Jack Nicklaus.
It makes it makes no sense logically. And I understand that logic and legal don't always share time in the same room together.
Correct.
And at the same time, I'll make a comparison for you. In my world, my dad is a successful businessman. He's Jack's age. He's 82 now. and is frequently being advised by people or asked by people for things, and they have no expertise. They have no standing in whatever it is they're asking about. But my dad has a default setting in his generous and kind heart that is, it seems like a nice guy. It's a good guy. He'll describe those people to me as he's the best there is. And it's quite likely that he's not. It's quite likely that he has no idea what he's talking about, but he sounded convincing. I don't know anything about Milstein. What I'm trying to figure out, though, here's Jack now, not only an icon of the game, but perhaps the most beloved figure in Columbus, Ohio. Perhaps. I mean, I don't know your town.
Archie Griffin probably is one, with Jack maybe being 1A among, again, it's generational, right?
Yeah. So if anybody came along and tried to take advantage of one of our favored sons in Columbus, I would have to think that at the Ohio State University, somebody would come along and go, Jack, we love you. We don't want any commission. We don't want any part of we don't want to wet our beak in all of this. Let us help you with this. It seems like that could happen and might be well received, but it doesn't sound like it ever did. Is Jack an independent-minded enough person that he has turned down offers of assistance, or has it just not been offered?
Well, I think here's the reality. It's a timeline thing in that Jack is beloved among those who are probably in their 70s and up in Columbus, but people don't realize he left Columbus in the mid-60s, I believe 1966. That's a long time ago, and he's been living in Florida.
Yeah.
And yes, he comes up to the Memorial Tournament. It's his baby, Muirfield Village. He made Dublin, Ohio, what it is in a lot of ways, in terms of an upscale neighborhood, suburb. But he is not like a huge factor in Columbus. He probably hasn't been for 50 years.
Yeah, that's fair.
While he probably has people connected, I'm not so sure. It's what have you done for me lately, sadly in life, in the world, especially in the business world. So I think he probably has some people, but I don't think he necessarily has maybe the right people or the most powerful people anymore. Now, that's not to say local people couldn't help bail him out. I just don't know. You've got the limited guy up here. You got Wexner, right? I mean, he could reach into his pocket and help Jack out, but I think there's just a disconnect, and that's maybe a convoluted, wordy way of saying that Jack is beloved, but he is kind of the golfer, not somebody who is really that connected with the community anymore.
Yeah, that's fair. He's an icon, but he's not a daily presence or a daily factor in all of it. Right. And yet I've been covering golf now for 35-ish, maybe 40 years. And I haven't yet met somebody who doesn't like Jack. I've met some who don't necessarily agree that he's the greatest of all, whatever, you can have the debates, but I haven't met anybody who doesn't like him. And I certainly haven't met anybody with an even wavering in any way opinion of Barbara. So this is a beloved couple throughout the industry. Does golf as a sport, with all of its various governing bodies and organizations, do they owe some sort of protectionary advice, not just to Jack, but let's look at Gary Player and the disaster that his kids have brought upon his life. And it seems like a lot of those great champions, I think Arnold largely avoided it, at least as far as I know, from this potential bankruptcy stuff. I mean, this stuff is really, really legacy shattering. When you're Jack's age, you really shouldn't have to go work. You may want to, which I think is where he is, but there are some old champions who have to go do exhibitions and have to do all these different things. Does golf owe Jack something more by way of advice and counsel?
That's a great point. First of all, I will say I don't think Jack's in any kind of economic hole here.
Right.
I mean, he even during the duress of this situation, he was paid pretty handsomely over a decade period to where he doesn't have to worry about it. Generational type wealth, and his kids are doing well. So maybe the tour or the powers that be in golf kind of look at Jack and say, this is unfortunate, but Jack's not really hurting. I mean, he's not out on the streets. If he was, for sure, people would step in.
Mm-hmm.
If Tiger Woods somehow someday, loses everything, I'm sure people would step in, like and the same would be said for Jack. I do think that they honor him through, he has a voice and he has a say. He is an ambassador of golf. The Memorial Tournament is getting up to, $20 million purse now. So it's one of the elevated, it's a great tournament, but if Jack's name isn't on that, it's probably not an elevated tournament. Same with Bay Hill and Arnie and these type of things. So to your point, I think there may be things happening behind the scenes, but there are a lot of attorneys at higher levels of the PGA Tour, and I think once it gets into that legalistic legalese, I think a lot of people get nervous at the higher levels, and the benevolent side maybe takes a back seat to the legal side.
Yeah, you're right.
That would be my take. A little bit of like, yeah, we love Jack, but we don't want to lose our shirt here. Sadly, money, is the root of a lot of evil.
Yeah, and these days it's hard to have a discussion about anything connected to golf without also including the Saudi factor in. Right. And that topic is also part of this conversation, right? I don't know if it was part of the lawsuit or not. I think so, but you've written extensively about this connection where Jack was kind of tempted by the Saudis to come be the face and voice of Live Golf to the tune of, more monopoly money. I'm really glad that he said no, but apparently that didn't make everybody happy.
Correct. Well, again, back to Milstein and the Jack Nicklaus company.
I'm becoming less a fan of Milstein the more you describe this guy.
Well, I think he's a smart guy.
Well, sure.
Right? He's
smart like a serpent.
And there you go. There you go. So really what happened was, I think, as a little bit of a needle to Jack, and we can get to that too, because I know Jack well enough that Jack loves to needle. Jack is a great guy, but he's got a needle in him. He likes to needle people. And if he needles you, that means he likes you typically. I've gotten needled quite a bit. And we can get into Jack a little bit, but on this specific point with the Saudis, yes. They approached Jack, and the Fire Pit Collective is a site, and
they're great.
Them, and that's where my thing with Jack is Jack loves to talk, and the media love him, and I say specifically the print media, because he has been very accommodating, just incredibly accommodating. But sometimes he doesn't turn off the word faucet.
Yeah, the filter is not there. That's for sure.
Filter's not there. And, I wrote in my column, and I got a lot of pushback on this, but I have a 94-year-old mother, and I'm getting up there myself a little bit. And I just know the filter, as you age, tends to disappear. Whether you're Jack or not, you get to a certain age, and it's like you don't really care what people think, because in a way you deserve to say whatever you want.
Yeah, so I can remember very vividly an example of that exact thing from last season, when the Ally Challenge, the PGA Tour Champions event, was at Warwick Hills in the middle of Michigan, and Jack comes in to be part of a celebrity event. And out on the putting green, there are 6 celebrities that are scattered around the putting green, media everywhere, and everybody's cloistered around Jack. And meanwhile, there's a heavyweight champion or middleweight champion over here nobody's talking to. And Jack's longtime manager, Scott, is standing right over his shoulder as always. And somebody's brought out a chair for Jack to sit in. He's not sitting, he's leaning on it, but he's just talking. And Scott says, all right, he's going to take like 2 or 3 questions. And so, 2 or 3 questions in, there's another question. And we're a half hour in. And then somebody asks Jack a little bit about Live. And Scott jumps into the fray, and he's like, we are talking about this event and this event only. And Jack says to him, Scott, I'm okay. I know how to handle this. And we did another, 10, 12 minutes. And he enjoys the discourse. And I love that about him, because it's far too rare in the world of golf. Believe it or not, Jack comes from an era of storytellers. He comes from the world of Trevino. He comes from the world where they never stop talking. And now he's in an era where you're supposed to give a soundbite that comes through an agent and it's been vetted 14 layers, and it actually ends up saying nothing. And so it's so refreshing when he comes out and talks. But you're right. There are times when he would be well served himself to just dial that back a little bit.
And that was one of these. He basically came out and said that Liv approached him to basically do the job that Greg Norman has.
Yeah.
That's very Jack, by the way. Very Jack. I mean, I love Jack. He's, as a kid, one of my favorites, but these guys all have a certain amount of ego. We all do. And so there's a little bit of Jack letting people know, in my view, that, that Jack in some ways was the first choice for this, but then he turned it down. He said he just owed it to the tour. He said, no thanks to Liv, but he put that out there. And so again, full circle back to Milstein, part of the lawsuit, some of the verbiage in there was that, well, we are the ones that convinced Jack to walk away from the Saudis. We confronted Jack essentially and said, Jack, this is bad for business. You can't associate with the Saudis with the human rights thing going on there. That will hurt Nicklaus business. And so they essentially said, we saved Jack from himself. Jack disputes this, but it was in the verbiage, in the documents, in the lawsuit. So that gets out. And then Jack said, I hope this just go. Essentially, I hope this goes away. I hope I don't have to talk about this. Well, at that point, game on. You're probably going to have to talk about it because of what I got into column. Jack is very opinionated, even with his politics now.
Right.
And as we all know, in the world today, you jump into the political fray, which is incredibly polarizing.
Yeah.
And you are going to make friends and enemies immediately. You are going to get canceled or you're going to be embraced. And so part of my column was that Jack, again, didn't need to, that filter didn't need to go there. Now, he had every right to go there. He has every right to endorse whoever he wants to, and we don't need to go too deep on this. But the point being that, it was a legacy issue, because I did get a lot of emails of Jack fans who were disappointed. It doesn't really matter who you endorse, that you would kind of jump into the fray, as LeBron James does, as a lot of these guys do. And they take heat for it. So,
and you wrote the phrase jeopardizing his beloved status, right? I mean, that's yes. A really succinct and proper way of putting it. And yet at the same time, I have to sit back and ask myself, why does the guy's opinion have to jeopardize his beloved status? Well, there are some lines that we have lost permission to cross. Maybe there was a time where you could share whatever opinion you have, and people go, that's just old Bill, that's just old Rob, that's just old Jack. Now, apparently, it's supposed to define you as a human, and your self-worth becomes part of your opinions. And I've never understood how that shift has taken place, but it has. And for Jack, I'm guessing it's going to be a little bit of a rough learning process.
It may be. I think social media has a lot to do with that. I mean, we're getting into cultural issues here that are probably beyond the scope of the pod, but I agree with you. You used to be able to say something and people would laugh it off or whatever, or disregard it and be able to focus on the golf. And I guess my point in today's world, if you stray beyond the guardrails, and what do they say? Stay in your lane. If you get out of your lane, if you get out of your lane, you pay the price, right or wrong.
There are some who are uncancelable, though, and one would like to think that Jack is in that category, if for no other reason than if he and his family, and I think next few generations, are financially secure, just say your piece, man, and have it, but just realize that there's probably some backlash on the other side. I don't see Jack scrolling through Twitter and worrying about what the trolls are saying about him.
And I put that in the column. I don't think really Jack cares much. I mean, and I think you're right. This you're not talking a mass exodus of, leaving Jack.
Yeah. They're not tearing his name off of course designs.
Exactly. And nor should they. Nor should they.
Right. Well, maybe a couple of them, but that
Yeah,
depends on where you are.
yeah, I guess so. That's fair.
I won't name
Um,
those courses.
yeah, yeah. But anyhow, that's kind of where Jack is. I was glad to see him have at least partial or temporary. Again, I'm not a lawyer, thankfully. Um, and I'm glad to see that he can continue with his design business.
Yeah, for sure. So you've had much more interaction with Jack because of proximity and what you do for a living than most people will ever have. What's your, away from all this stuff where courtrooms and lawyers and shysters are involved, what's your favorite personal moment with Jack?
I did a story years ago when his mother passed, and just talked about his mother, her faith, um, and got Jack talking a little bit about that. He was a little closed off, but just he teared up. So I've done that. I just like talking to Jack about golf, about the memories he has. He really does care about his fans. He cares about, I wouldn't, not necessarily his legacy, but I think he does feel like he owes the game, and I love that. But in terms of a one-on-one personal, um, probably when his mother died, and also I don't know if I talked to him. I think I did. A very sad story was that Steve, I don't know if you know Steve, his son lost a child drowned,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
believe. And I wrote about that, and Jack appreciated that.
Hmm.
So that was, there's kind of two sad things, honestly. Now, as I think about it, kind
Yeah.
of a human emotion heart thing. Um, in terms of the golf side, he tears up when he's just happy. He
Hmm.
just gets he reminisces, and he's got a sharp mind. He can remember most everything from like every shot. Most great golfers, or even really good golfers, which I do not include myself in that, can remember every shot from 20 years ago.
Well,
It's incredible.
yeah, we all flash back to the 86 Masters quite frequently, right? And there's
Yes.
so many other examples of that. I am maybe it's because the older I get, the more I think in terms of legacy. But I sure do hope that however many days, months, years Jack still has with us, I hope they're free from courtrooms and free from these corporate struggles. And I hope that he is learning or has learned to insulate himself from the weasels
Mm,
because he's got a lot, and there are a lot of people out there who would like to take a little piece at a time from him, and he doesn't need their help.
no.
So here's hoping that he surrounds himself with people who just care about him and are willing to maybe even forego some personal recognition and wealth in the interest of serving somebody, just like he and Barbara act in the interest of other people so often. So that's my hope for him.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I don't think that should be lost and or underplayed. The humanitarian Jack, uh, he doesn't have to do the things he does. He
Right.
doesn't have
Right.
to work with Nationwide Children's Hospital in Columbus, or down in where he lives in Florida, the hospital there. He
Mm.
doesn't have to do any of this stuff, um, but he does, and I give Barbara a lot of credit for that. Again, she's fantastic,
Yeah.
and probably, if anybody can hold him accountable, not that he needs a lot of that, she can do it
I
with
told
one look.
I told Barbara at that same Ally Challenge, she was out as she always is. She's always nearby while Jack's holding court, and I walked over to her and I just thanked her for her being who she is, and I said, and just so you know, on this day, we are happy to welcome a Buckeye into Wolverine country. And she smiled and she said, there are 364 days a year where we find that to be a wonderful thing. And she's, she can put things with such a classy touch, and she did once
Yeah.
again. Rob,
Yeah.
thank you for connecting with us, and great job filling in the gaps on a kind of a confusing story. So hopefully you and I will get a chance to talk again, and maybe one of these days you come up here and play golf, let me know, and maybe we can tee it up together.
That'd be fantastic. I really appreciate the time. I always enjoy talking about Jack. He really is, as I call him, the greatest champion in golf history.